Well, hello. I didn't see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Cracking the China Code with Ben. So today we're going to be talking about something that gets a lot of sort of sensationalized coverage in the Western media, and that is this idea that people talk about a new Cold War between China and the United States. People are very concerned about that. They're wondered about the future of these two countries, and they're thinking it's going to go back, to the bad old days. And the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all of this sort of tension and military conflict, and that's where a lot of people, I think, are very frightened things are going. There's a great new book just out called The Coming Contest by a man named Geoff Dyer. He's a veteran reporter. He's been in China for I think 10 years at least, and it's an interesting take on this question. And what he looks at is the sort of very recent developments that we've been seeing in the last couple of years, and he's trying to sort of crystallize these into a trend. With Hu Jintao, what you had was a sort of very hopeful period between the United States and China. Hu Jintao was following this sort of general guidance set out by Deng Xiaoping and implemented first by Jiang Zemin, the next premier following Deng. And the idea was that China should focus exclusively on economics, to the exclusion of politics and of having this assertive foreign policy. So the idea was they were going to not push around countries that were next to them. They were going to make good with the United States and Europe, and they were still going to be drawing lines in the sand about political questions that they considered internal to China. So things like human rights or political opposition groups, things like that. They weren't going to be compromising on. But in foreign policy, they were going to be magnanimous, they were not going to make demands, they were going to lie low. What we've seen in the last couple of years, especially under Xi Jinping, towards the end of Hu Jintao's reign, and definitely under Xi Jinping, is that China has become much more assertive. And this is something that's gotten people worried. For example, China has just launched its first aircraft carrier. They have done a successful takeoff and landing of a military jet from that carrier. They've been very assertive in disputes of islands with, not least Japan, that's the most famous one, the Senkaku or Diaoyudao Islands, depending on who you ask, with Vietnam, with Malaysia, with Indonesia, with the Philippines, and they've made a big deal about securing this naval area around China. And the surrounding Asian countries, we're seeing a big shift. We're seeing these Asian countries start to balance against China, start to be looking back towards the United States. The United States was at this sort of low moment in 06, 07. We were stuck down in the Iraq War, our economy was in the crapper, and so countries were trying to look to an alternative to American leadership, and people were saying that's going to be China. Now the situation is a little bit different, because China is feeling increasingly comfortable pushing its way through the world. They're starting to get dragged into these other questions in international politics. Some of them against their will, and some of them they're focusing on as part of something, and this is something that Geoff Dyer talks about, and I think he does a good job of this, of capturing the psychology of a state that's becoming, for the first time in living memory, a real international power. You'll see these prestige projects that make no sense economically. Like, for example, high-speed rails. The Chinese just spent about $500 billion to build high-speed rail networks between all of their major cities. You see things like the lunar rover. There's not a good scientific or economic rationale for sending a rover to the moon. It's something the countries did to announce that they'd arrived. So you're going to be seeing more things like that from China. You're going to see these prestige projects. You're also going to see an increasingly self-confident China that's not looking to learn lessons from the world the way it was before. That was a very difficult thing for China to do for so many decades, was to sort of lay down your pride and to say, how can we learn from other countries? We're going to take on all of their expertise, their technology, their experience. We're going to bring it to China, and we're going to study and learn humbly. That is coming to an end as Chinese companies become more self-sufficient. Like, for example, with cell phones. I mean, they're not challenging Apple or Samsung in the high-end smartphone space, but they have carved out a very self-sufficient niche in the sort of low or middle markets. And you'll see things like that with automobiles. They're going to be paying a lot more attention in the coming years. This is my prediction. They're going to be paying a lot more attention to making Chinese cars competitive at the sort of low to mid-range. And politically, you're also going to see some tendencies towards confrontation. China is not going to accept that it is like any other country in the international order. That's an idea that originated in Europe after the Peace of Westphalia. That something that Henry Kissinger talks about, and he's right. That idea of multiple states interacting on an equal basis. That's a European thing. The Chinese they are not going to accept that they are only one country in this whole system. In their eyes, they are going to be unique. So, if I had to give you an answer, is there going to be a Cold War? There are worrying signs that there will be increased confrontation. There's going to be more friction. But, at the same time, my answer is no. Because these prestige projects that we're seeing so much investment into, the aircraft carrier, the high-speed rails, the lunar rover, these are projects that are not designed to actually make China a superpower. They are intended to announce China's arrival into the world, and the actual focus, I think, of real Chinese foreign policy is going to be on much more mundane questions. And for those questions, China will still not act. I mean, American diplomacy is not going to be the same with Vietnam and China. And that's just a fact, because China considers itself a large, important country that's historically been at the center of Asia, and Vietnam is more pragmatic about its place in the world. So, if you want to check it out, I recommend this book by Geoff Dyer. What I would say is that take it with a grain of salt, because the other thing that we see over here, me and Matt, is the other side of that. There's a front that's presented to the world, and like the lunar rover, that's an impressive engineering achievement, and I don't mean to take anything away from that. But the fact is that there are massive sectors of the economy, of politics, of the society, of law and jurisprudence that the Chinese have really yet to start reforming in a way that would make them competitive internationally. And so I think those are the things you're going to need to look for. You're really going to need to kind of get down in the more mundane, boring stuff. I think if you want to find out if China's about to become a superpower. It's flashy, it's splashy, it's tension grabbing when they put a lunar rover on the moon, but it doesn't mean anything about how strong their country is going to be in 10 years. So I would say, read the book, don't get caught up. Don't get caught up. I think we need to be a little bit more sober about how limited China's goals are going to be for the foreseeable future. So, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments. You want to discuss amongst yourselves, you want to disagree with me. Actually, you can't disagree with me in the comments. I will delete your comments if you disagree with me because you're wrong. But if you want to agree with me, I would appreciate that. So feel free to agree with me in the comments below. See you next time on Cracking the China Code.